Hi, my name is Shea Kerkhoff, and I am an associate professor at the University of Missouri St. Louis. Before becoming a professor, I was a high school teacher for several years. I wanted to share a little bit about the global teaching model and explain some things that might not be apparent in the article. First of all, the global teaching model was created through a mixed method study. I began by interviewing teachers, sitting down with them and having conversations about what was working in their classroom to help their students become more globally minded and globally competent. From those interviews, I then created a survey to see if what these teachers were doing was generalizable to a larger population. And so this model was created through the empirical analysis of those two data sets. Based on the analysis, the global teaching model has four factors: situated, integrated, critical, and intercultural. The first is situated. Situated really has to do with being relevant and real. So, thinking about making learning relevant to our students always begins with relationship, as good teaching does. So, we get to know our students and we get to know about their families and communities. We also think about the authentic learning experiences that could happen in our local community. So, for instance, some teachers have worked with the Confucius Institute in their city, a sister city, an international nonprofit, or an international business. And if you're not sure where to start, like what is in my local community, you could use the Mapping the Nation resource. The next factor is integrated. And this means that global learning isn't just a one night event or a one off lesson. It's integrated throughout the day, all classrooms for all students. This means that our lessons have two objectives. They have our course curricular objective, our standard course of study, as well as that intercultural and global competence piece. And so, one way that I've done this in my own classroom is going to the New York Times Learning Resources. They have a series called What's Going On in This Picture. And the pictures are from all over the world. And before the New York Times posts what the picture is about, they just put the picture, and the students get to use their evidence and reasoning skills to figure out what is going on in this picture, what's the evidence that they see that makes them say that. And then I keep asking them, what more can you find? What more can you find? And it's really fun. And then the following week, the New York Times posts the full story. The third factor is critical. Critical has to do with critical thinking and critical media literacy. So, in this way, students understand that all messages are constructions with economic, political, social, and aesthetic purposes. When they understand that sources are people, they can begin to evaluate the reliability, they can consider authority as well as perspective, and consider multiple sources and perspectives. So, one teacher introduced me to the resource allsides.com, which shows multiple perspectives of different topics. The other part of the critical factor is making sure that we are asking our students and that we ourselves are listening for marginalized voices. In our curriculum, sometimes there is a majority view perspective in our curriculum. So we need to look at, okay, whose voices are present here and whose are left out. And this is where we can look for counter narratives. We can look for other sources to help supplement our curriculum. What I find especially is that international voices from the global south may not be represented in our curriculum. One resource I love, I taught English, is the Global Read Aloud, which happens each October. Um, I did it in my English class, but I've seen other teachers do it in their homeroom or in their social studies or science even class. So check it out. And then the other project I've had my students do is a critical consumerism project where they think about um, either the technology that they are using and how it's made, or the food they're eating, or the NPR T-shirt project that sources a T-shirt being made and how that travels all over the world, and also looking at the matters of equity in these different consumerism conversations. The fourth factor has been renamed to be intercultural. Coming from an English language arts and literacy perspective, when we use the word transactional, we are talking about how knowledge is built in the transaction between texts and people, and as people have discussions with other people. However, that word didn't always translate to other theoretical viewpoints. So instead, I use the word intercultural to talk about interactions that are based on equality, that are mutually beneficial, where students are able to learn from and with people from a different culture than they are. This can happen right in our classrooms, but this also can happen internationally when we are looking at our virtual options. So check out ePals or iEarn to find collaborators in other countries. I like to use WeChat or WhatsApp when working with people in other countries. Those tend to work well. And things like Canva or Genially are places where students can co-create products. And so this is an example of Genially that we used. So I hope you are able to use this model to help you think about the different dimensions of your lesson and take your lessons to a deeper level.